Kurian is the founder of the sales and marketing strategy firm called StrategyPeak Sales and Marketing Advisors, and a close to 30-year veteran of the sales and marketing industry. Kurian, I am so delighted to have you here as our guest today because I have learned that you can teach anyone to be more charismatic, compelling, and persuasive through a simple framework outlined in your book. So welcome, teach us and take it away.
Thanks for having me on your show, Kat.
Oh yeah, we're so excited to have you here.
So where do you want to start? You know, we got a lot of topics and grounds that we can cover. So let's start with a seed question of some kind. Where do you want to start?
Well, you know what? I really love to start with asking our guests to tell us a little bit about your background, you know, so we can get to know you, a little flavor about you, if you, whatever you want to share.
Well, I've been in the sales and marketing business now for almost 30 years. I'm in my mid 50s now. I can tell you that when I started in this business compared to what I understand about the business now is night and day difference. And I hope none of my clients from in my mid 20s hear this, but I was utterly clueless at that time in comparison. But I guess we all grow, right? We grow in our understandings and in our maturity. At least I hope we do. Some people, you know, what's the old line? You know, you're only young once, but you can stay immature forever. Hopefully that's not the case for all of us. But yeah, it's been a while now. It's been an interesting stint to this point. I've gotten into some angel capital investing at this point in time. So I have a couple of interests in some companies that are in related businesses. And so, you know, working with a lot of young people, it helps you keep me young in the process as well. I don't look that old, do I?
You don't look that old, but I love it. You're in your 50s. 50s is such a great decade. So am I. And I love what you said. You know what? I was clueless too in my 20s. You know, a few decades can ideally add a lot of wisdom to us, right? But like you said, not always. That's the theory anyway. So we're going with it. And in that theory, I think it's great that you work with younger kids. You know, you can bring your wisdom and your experience, you know, to help them, you know, get started, which is really cool. And we have a lot of listeners that are entrepreneurs too, or have small businesses. So really excited to have you here. You know, when we talked really quick before this started, I love that you said that the information in your book can be applied to so many different things, not just business. I know business is your specialty, but I love that it can be extrapolated on. When we talk about being compelling or getting people to buy our things, like if we're in business, how could you go about with your background teaching people to, you know, where would you start to teach people what to do?
It's my theory now that no one ever sells a product or service first.
Okay.
You can't. What you have to sell is the story first. And the story is a very specific story. It's your customer as hero.
Okay.
And so if your customer is the hero, what does that make you? That makes you the fairy godmother, the wise wizard, granting the hero of your story, your customer. And your customer can be your employees, it can be your suppliers, it can be your investors. It doesn't just have to be somebody that buys things from you. They might buy into you. And that's the whole point I'm trying to say. So the very first thing that they buy is that story where they are the hero. And then you are granting them in that story a magic amulet, a magic incantation, right? Magic strategy that will help them transport them to transform them from this current state that they're in to some magical future state where everything's better, at least much better than it is right now. Otherwise, there's no reason to actually engage with you, is there? So you have to sell the story first. Once they buy into that story, the product sales are natural. It just happens.
That's awesome. So how do people tell a good story? Like, what do they do? Or what are some of the components?
Well, the ultimate first component, and there's thousands of books out there on storytelling.
Right.
And, you know, great stuff, a lot of it free. You can find it on YouTube and all sorts of things. And when I was first researching my book, what I recognized was there's a lot of books out there and instruction on storytelling, but very few on what stories to tell. And, you know, and so you have a story plot line, and it can be very poorly told, which makes a great story a poor story if it's poorly told. But you can't make a poor story a great story by telling it well. It's still a dumb story.
Right.
right? It's a stupid story. So the plot line has to be absolutely in place first before you can actually compel it with all of the different devices that you would use. But the ultimate thing where you start is you have to have a deep understanding of the customer's pain and the customer's gain and their deep motives as to why they are doing anything that they're doing in their lives, let alone looking at your products and services.
I love that you just touched on both the customer's pain and the customer's gain, because, you know, being in different sales backgrounds, we hear so much about focusing on the pain point, which I get that. But what you shared about the gain is equally as important, I think, and makes this, I would assume, make the story more compelling. You know?
And in fact, pain points and gain points, they are opposite sides of the same coin. You can reposition almost anything from a gain point to a pain point and vice versa, pain point to gain point. So saving for retirement can be positioned as a gain point. But the opposite of that, to say, state it as a pain point is, what if you don't save for retirement? And it's the same thing, but the way you approach it is the same, is the difference in whether you frame it as a pain or a gain point.
So and is that a skill people can learn about, how to reframe like questions and reframe these story points? Or do you believe that it's just innate and we're lost?
Problem with adults is that they've forgotten what it is to be children. And children, for the most part, right at the very beginning, you trade cute for all of these things, security and, everything, all sorts of security, from safety to food to housing to the love of your parents or whoever else it is around there. You trade cute. And along the way, as soon as you develop some language skills, you get into negotiation. Kids are natural negotiators, right? And they know what it is to position, reposition, to bargain, all these kind of things. And adults, when you get out in the world, part of the problem with socialization and education is that you are told that there's a way to do it, a way to, whatever those ways are. In a negotiation, you'll talk about BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Okay, wow, remember my BATNA. Kids don't know BATNA. There's no BATNA for a 7-year-old. They're negotiating to go to the zoo next Saturday with Katie, their best friend. And they know their innately what that BATNA is, right? But
they know their end game.
Exactly. And they will negotiate and parlay their understandings of what their parents' motives are in order to help them achieve what they want out of that situation.
And then why do you think we kind of beat this out of our children, right? This social conditioning and programming where we all tend to lose this natural ability that you're talking about to know what we want and focus on it. We get caught up in so many other things.
It's a part of the overall idea of socialization, period. And socialization happens in family settings, in school settings, society as a whole. And socialization is just another word for programming.
Right.
It's just another word for programming. You have all these different types of things. And what you're trying to do is to install the culture of the society that you live in and the values of that culture and the belief systems of that culture into that child's head. So by the time that they are 17, 18, 19, whatever it is, right, they can go out and start figuring out how to get to move forward. And a good chunk of that is about what not to do. It's not, you're programmed in not as much as to what to do. There are certain things you do, listen to the boss, all right, pay your taxes and things like that. But there's a whole set of admonitions about what not to do. And so we are programmed through the programming is we are programmed to protect ourselves and to be reticent and not ask for too much and those kinds of things. So we are programmed to behave rather than to achieve necessarily, right? The behaving part of it to be not complicit, to comply with society's expectations is more highly valued in certain circumstances than your ability to push the envelope and to get what you want, which is the whole aspect that entrepreneurs, have to dispense with. They have to get rid of this old social programming and go after what they want.
Right. And do you find that is challenging for a lot of entrepreneurs to get rid of that programming?
I think entrepreneurs, if you're a natural entrepreneur, you've never lost that kid-like innate ability to ask for what you want, right? But where you run into problems, I've been in this situation a few times with classes that I've taught, where perhaps there's a whole swath of an industry sector that is now laid off, for example. And I remember in the mid '90s here in Canada. I live in a province called Alberta. We had a whole set of layoffs in the healthcare sector. So we had all these nurses that were suddenly out of a job, and and they went to school to be nurses, but now maybe they had to entrepreneur in order to provide for their families, and now it's a completely different way of thinking. And let me tell you, after those entrepreneurship courses, they never looked at something on the shelf at Safeway ever again. Now they can see the marketing message and the processes of influence, coming right at them and affecting their decision making as to purchase or not purchase.
That's a good point. I think so many of us, I'll speak for myself, went around blind for a long time about the outside influence, about being sold to on so many levels, not just in the grocery store, but everywhere. And so with those nurses, when they their eyes, when they woke up a little to what was really happening, do you find that it was easier for them to start shifting their career, let's say, to a more entrepreneurial venture, or does it really depend on the individual?
It really depends on the individual. What I find is there's many different organs in your body that affect your entrepreneurship ability. And you can say one of the most prominent ones is your brain and the way you think and the way your mind filters information and the resulting meanings that information provides, right? But I'll also tell you that one of the most critical organs in your body that enables your entrepreneurial state is your stomach. And your ability to stomach fear and uncertainty and just putting yourself out there to be judged by all sorts of people, including your family and your friends and people that care about you in an entrepreneurial venture. And so that stomach, regardless of what your mind thinks, may not allow you to fully commit to that new career venture that you want to go forward with.
That's interesting. And it resonates, but the stomach, as you were talking, I could just feel when we pay attention to our stomach in those situations of being judged and being, out there and the feedback not being so good. So do you think that it really can stop people? It's limiting,
Well, absolutely. In fact, you can see it regularly, right? Like entrepreneurship in a lot of ways is simply putting yourself out there, your creations, which are basically your babies, out there for the world to judge. And, and just being told this, your baby is ugly. It's a very tough thing to hear sometimes. But, Apple has had its share of ugly babies. If you remember the Newton back in the 90s and such, that was an ugly child. But, you don't hear as much about those as the beautiful children of the iPad, iPod, iPhone, et cetera, right? But you will go through those kinds of things. But that initial part of allowing your mind to override the fear and the uncertainty and the pit of your stomach going up and down is what gets you over the hump. And, and not caring what the marketplace thinks other than to absorb it in cold feedback. And using that cold feedback, regardless of what that is, to advance to your next step. Right. And so it's, it is ugly feedback. It is terrific feedback. Both of those are not necessarily good, right? Because, you can only use that feedback in the way the data that it provides, not the emotional state that it produces. And so the data will tell you which way to actually take that next step. Do I advance the designs of this product? Do I adjust the cost structure of the product? And it can be hundreds of things. But get rid of the polarity of extreme pessimism and extreme exhilaration and just absorb the data itself. And based on that, you're overriding the stomach, because the stomach is really, really sensitive to those emotion things. So I can put this into something that a lot of people can very easily relate to, especially guys. And that
Okay.
is, when you are in the dating stages of your life, some people may enter that again, their mid 50s and such like that.
Mhm.
Most people have no problem talking with somebody, if they've been introduced to them, and said, Kat, this is Kurian. Kurian's a author of a book that just came out last year. And, I think he'd be a great guest for your podcast. Now we have a conversation basis.
Right.
Right. We could have met 2 weeks ago on the street, and we'd have a great conversation on that thing. Right. And
Mhm.
maybe there would have been a spark there. You never know. Now, I'll tell you what scares the hell out of most guys.
What is
The,
that?
the cold approach.
Ah.
Hey, Kurian, go over there. Kat, she's quite pretty. Go and say hi to her. No, I'm not going to do that. No, she might reject me, and it goes like the cold approach is what the fear is all about. But if I'm introduced and you take that, with somebody that we have common trust in,
Right.
right?
They take the
You
edge
take
off.
out exactly. Now we're working with data, and we're working with whether we have rapport with each other, whether we like each other, and
Mhm.
you go through those kinds of things. And so that whole front section, that cold approach and such, that's where that pit of the stomach has to be overridden.
Right. So when we override that pit of the stomach, whether it's in business or dating, and we can just kind of put it in its place, we can continue to take those steps forward and see if our product is really viable, if our dating life is really worth continuing, right? We have to kind of table it or put it in check somehow. Is that
we got to put it in
what you're
check?
thinking?
You have to look at it objectively, right? You can enjoy the emotions. Fear is sometimes very enjoyable in the middle of a movie theater,
Mhm.
in a horror flick. That's its purpose. Exhilaration is always welcome, but not to the point of giddiness where it overrides your judgment.
Right.
And where you're making stupid decisions thereafter. That's that can be the realm of a con artist. Right, and it's those kinds of things. So we have to look at the stories that we tell on the basis of its ability to elicit the response we want. The whole purpose of communication is response. If you're not getting the response that you want, you're not communicating properly. You are not communicating properly.
So can we always shift or tweak the story to get the response that we want? Do you believe?
The answer is yes. The answer is always yes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're serving your audience or yourself.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? Because
that's quite a distinction. Yeah.
That's quite the distinction. So, and I don't want to point out any news networks down in the US there, but they're telling all sorts of stories. Some of these networks are telling all sorts of stories that they themselves may not believe. But boy, oh boy, the ad dollars just keep rolling in because they are telling stories that people want to hear, regardless of its veracity.
Interesting. I found a solution to that. I just stopped listening. I just stopped listening to the news outlets.
Right. And if you take a look at it, I miss the days of Walter Cronkite and where the news was the news and there wasn't an angle. And and the polarity wasn't there. We're not serving an algorithm that is intended to bring more and more people from a smaller and smaller slice of the demographic psychographic, so that we can engage them more. Right? It's more that cold news, and this is what it means.
Right, and we don't see, like you said, much of that anymore. The cold news or just the facts, but
just the facts, ma'am. Please, just the facts. That's what was that Dick Tracy? I don't know if that's Dick Tracy.
I forget who said it. Yeah, but just the facts,
right?
ma'am. But in sales, and I was thinking of this before our interview, and I was listening to a couple other things about the storytelling. It's like facts tell and story sell. So, we don't talk facts anymore in the news. So how does that translate to what we're sharing or selling? People want the facts or the benefits, but if I'm understanding you correctly, we're leading with the story. It's not that we're never sharing facts or benefits. Is that?
Facts are boring.
Sure.
Okay. Facts infused with meaning, though, become a truth.
Okay.
Okay. And a truth with the letters TH at the end of it, not true. A fact is true. But a fact infused with meaning becomes a truth. So
Okay.
down in the US, again, you have two big political parties, regardless of any green parties or whatever, the People's Party now. But you have the Republicans and the Democrats, extreme polarity these days. And the same set of facts interpreted through the lens of meaning from a Democratic perspective or a Republican perspective, let alone any of its fringes, results in different motives being served and different actions being taken.
Agreed.
Same set of facts, so we talk about, solar energy. Well, by itself is just a concept, solar energy. What does it mean though? Oh, it means that if we go with solar energy, we're going to displace all sorts of work, of employment in the oil and gas sector. Okay, that could be one.
But is that true?
Now, let me give you the other meaning that
Okay.
can happen as well, right? Well, no, solar panels, solar energy means energy independence, which is very akin to what what more of right of center politics might want to have. That's much more of a conservative point of view. Same set of facts. Solar energy is on the rise.
Right.
What does it mean?
What does it mean? That we have to look at the agenda of the person giving us the information?
Always.
Right.
Always, right? And you not only have to look at the agenda of the person that is espousing whatever position that they're putting forward, but we also have to take a look at the audience and their reactions to it. Are they accepting it? Are they accepting it? Absolutely, this is the way to go. Or is it sort of a cold, tolerance to that message? Or are they rejecting it completely? And between those 3 points, you're going to have some kind of ability for those set of facts infused with meaning, which becomes a truth, to move that audience to action.
Okay. So the end game is to move the audience to action.
Always.
Correct? Always.
Always. Well, otherwise, what's the point?
Right.
If you put a comedian up there, a comedian that doesn't make his audience laugh is not a comedian. A politician that does not get their constituents to move to action is a poor politician. You're just taking up space on a backbench seat or whatever it is, right? And that's why agendas don't move forward. So the only way you move agendas forward, there's basically a couple of ways. One, at the point of a gun. The second, it can be at the behest of a carrot that is being led with a stick, right? That could be a way as well. Or the best way is through self-volition. And so you are engendering that drive and that passion and that direction within the people themselves. They choose to move forward because they've been told a story and they've accepted a story that is complete alignment with the culture that they have, the lenses that they have, frames of reference, and what they want out of life, what they want for themselves, for their children, for their communities, all that kind of stuff. When you align those two things, then you have a self-propagated movement that takes place.
I love that.
And that's all self-generated energy. You don't have to keep filling up the tank on your own to them, right? You're not bribing them or beating them. They're doing it because they want to do it because they believe in the mission.
Right. So if they believe in the mission, we've told a good story. So it goes back, or we've shared our story really well. Is that fair to say?
Yes, you ignited something in them that either they've already believed in, right, and now they see a path forward, or you've installed in them a different way to look at the world, where they come up with this idea. I didn't know that. Your eyes are completely now wide open, and you see the world in a completely different way. So you think of evangelical movements of various kinds. You go into the revival tent in the old days, right? And you come out born again. Woohoo, right? And if you take a look at that from that perspective, so that's a religious perspective. But marketing, for the most part, takes its cues. Great marketing takes its cues from great religion.
Can you share us on that a little more?
Sure. Well, way back when, in the early 70s, Steve Jobs hired a marketing consultant by the name of Regis McKenna. And Regis McKenna was the marketing's guru to all the up and coming Silicon Valley stars at that time, and so Silicon Valley was in its infancy at that point, but he was the guru. And that was his whole point, that great marketing takes its cues from great religion. Now, if you take a look at historically, the world has had thousands of religions throughout history. Recorded history is about 5,000 years old now. Modern humans have been around for 200,000 years, gathering around fires and, and being able to, to tell stories in some way, right? It may not be the fluency of English or French or Spanish or anything like that, but gather around fires, 200,000 years, modern humans. And so the whole point with this idea of religion now, with all these thousands of religions along that time, the dominant ones right now are Christianity with about 2.1 billion people, adherents, Islam, which is about 1.8 billion. And then we have all sorts of people, and it just drops like a rock from there. Right. Judaism is only about 14 million worldwide. There are only 14 million Jews, practice. Well, I don't know about practicing Jews, but 14 million claimants to that religion, right? That's it. But if you take a look at the top two, they're both Abrahamic religions. Obviously, Judaism is as well, right? Why is that? And the reason why, and then you got Buddhism and there's Zoroastrianism, all sorts of things, right? It's because the stories thrive. The stories of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and in fact, they all borrow from the same Old Testament at the beginning, and then they go slightly different directions, after that, maybe real different directions. But the stories are what thrive, and part of the angle with the first two, the biggest ones, is a core aspect of their religion is proselytization, evangelical missions to bring more people into the tent. Well, you can't bring more people to the tent until you tell them what's going to be playing in the tent. Right?
You're going to share the good news.
Share the good news. Share the good news. Have you heard the good news? Have you heard the good news, Kat? And so you have all these different stories, from creation and origin to salvation, to redemption, to all these kinds of things that are so resonant that they bring more and more people into the tent. And so if you wonder why Zoroastrianism is just sort of a footnote right now, and my apologies to any Zoroastrians out there. Freddie Mercury was a Zoroastrian.
Okay,
is because they don't have the same evangelical fervor to tell that story that the first two big religions do.
Right. Why is that? Why do some not have that fervor to share their story the way these top two do?
It's part of their culture.
Okay.
It is part of their culture, and culture is simply the way we do things around here. Okay. And culture, the core aspects of culture are beliefs and values and, and things like that. One of their values is we tell other people about the good news. That's
we
part
share
of
it.
And then there's methods to do that. Sunday school. Door-to-door knocking, there's all sorts of the
testimonials
and on it goes like that. And so great marketing will take its cues from great religion. And I just read a article that 20 years ago, whatever, I don't know how long it was ago exactly, right? But one of the key things that Apple did after the advent of the iPad, iPod, et cetera, was to build a temple.
I didn't know that.
Products. And the temple is the Apple Store. And it is a seductive experience.
It is.
And there's lineups to get into that temple. And you have all these different, competitive products like Samsung and such, right? You know what their temples are? The AT&T store. Right?
Not their own store.
It's not their own store. And, and people have tried to do it, but no one's been as successful at it as Apple has. Tesla, I walked into a Tesla store in Scottsdale a couple of years ago, right? But it is nowhere near the seductive experience of the Apple temple.
I love that reference, the Apple temple. I'm never going to walk into the Apple store again the same.
If you think about when you walk into that, though, it's a full sensory experience.
It is. It's shiny, it's bright, it's clean, it's organized. It's
Yeah,
people are there
yeah.
to help you with a smile, and they're really informed. They know their product.
And it's an expansive possibility. That's
Mhm.
the mindset that you walk in with, right? We know, what
Yeah.
can I do today? I know, what can I, and that is the purpose of religion, is to renew your sense of purpose,
Mhm.
renew your sense of direction, and to energize you with this possibility of what comes after, even when we're done here.
Mhm. So when we are working with people like in our organizations, and our businesses, how do we cultivate that experience for them, like in a different way? Like, how do we get them to come out recognizing or embodying all the possibilities for themselves? Are there steps to the story? Are there?
Well, the book will outline it. And, if you
Okay.
come to my website, strategypeak.com, right now on the right side, you can download an infographic that gives you all 7 stories free.
Oh, awesome.
Right. So just
Okay.
come by and do that. Right. But it's 7 primary stories, and you tell these stories, but you tell them in a compelling way. You tell them passionately and energetically, because you believe the stories yourself. The storyteller
Well,
believes his stories.
I was
Right.
going to ask you about that.
The storyteller has to believe their stories, right? Or at least be such a great actor that it looks like they believe the stories. We go back to a couple of your networks, your television networks down there, and I think a recent lawsuit against one of their news anchors, quote, news anchors, was, the lawyer said, well, that if anybody believes this guy, they're failing to recognize this is entertainment.
Mhm. It is
Right?
entertainment,
It is
but a lot of people don't recognize that, right?
right.
So
Exactly right. So you and I are having a good conversation now. At least I am. How about
okay,
you?
I am too.
Right. Okay.
It's fun. It's informative.
It's fun. It's informative, right? And it teases possibilities.
Hmm.
And this is the equivalent of a cold approach.
Okay.
Right now, if you believe anything of what I have been talking about right now, we can make a time to go to the next step, whatever that step is.
Okay.
Like if I'm a marketer, right? If you're a prospect, not yet customer, then I've got the intrigue level, the excitement level, the energy level, and I've engaged your emotions on different stages and aspects, different categories of emotion, and I've got you to an energetic state where you will take the next step. And if I haven't been able to induce that energetic state, I don't have the possibility of a sale. So the story is meant to be the medium that allows me to deliver this energetic state. I tell my staff this all the time, is that, and I have a digital marketing agency here in town here, and 20 staff, a lot of them young. And well, I'll tell them one of the key businesses we are in the energy transfer business.
I love that.
Right. And so we can deliver a social media campaign as well. That's good. But that's sort of like just the fact. That's like a fact, right? Facts are boring, right? But the energy transfer, you come in mopey and morose and things like that, there's not going to be much trust that client has with you. So you've got to induce the emotive level that you want that client to have. And you've got to deliver it yourself, within yourself, in order to transfer that.
Right. So you've got to have some passion inside yourself and some life and upbeat energy yourself. And like you said, belief in it.
And that doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert. It just means, what it absolutely means, though, is that you have to have a deep belief in what you are saying. Right. And once you have that deep belief, and when I say that I can make anybody more charismatic and compelling, I mean it. You might not be able to get on the stage like Steve Jobs does, right? And be able to deliver that level of thing. But I will tell you, whatever level you're at right now, with just a little bit of effort, you can get to the point where, wow, she was believable. She really thought that this was the way to go. We got to explore this a little further. There's a framework there. There's a strategy there. There's a deliverable there. I really like her, and it's those kinds of things. So the messenger is as much about the message as the facts of the message itself.
Okay. I like that. And that rings true. Like I am having flashbacks of different experiences in my life and about the messenger. And one thing I wanted to ask you, because when you touched on the energy, like transfer or transmutation, I mean, everything is energy, right? So I love that this is all about energy. And when we think of things in the terms of energy, that belief and that passion, it makes me think of the heart. So you were talking earlier about the brain and the gut. Do you feel like, can we bring in a third organ? Can we bring in the heart into this for a minute?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And in fact, here's something that'll blow your mind. You might already know it. Your body actually has three brains. And if we define brain as areas of high neuron clusters, okay, so neurons are what make up your brain, right? High concentrations of neuron clusters. There's actually three brains. And the very first brain is your brain. And that's where your mind theoretically does all its shenanigans, right? And whether good or bad, whatever it is, right?
We won't go there.
And, so that's your mind. And, people have to also understand your mind is not you.
Right.
Your mind is what you think with. If you ever think, you can actually watch your mind. Right. And watch it be fearful, watch it get excited, watch it do, nothing.
Be the observer.
Be the observer, be the witness, right? Be the witness, right? Okay. So the mind resides in your brain, and that's where it is. Second one is the very high cluster of neurons is in your heart, heart area. So heart clusters, right? The third one is in your stomach. And the way I define these three here, and it's not just my definition, it's based on lots of different neurophysiological research and such. Your mind is there to, your brain is there to calculate. Okay, so it's meant to, to weigh options and project into the future and those kind of things. Your heart is there to basically, it's different aspects of love. Okay. And whether you have, it can be as simple as I like, or I have affinity, or there's compassion, or those kind of, and your stomach is there to keep you safe. And that, I can see the calculation. I really like this person, but my stomach, there's something wrong there. But it's only when all three of these brains are in full alignment that you can really be sure of the decision that you make forward. It may still be the wrong decision, but it's only when these three are in alignment that you are confident to move that forward. So when you are telling stories and you're creating those key messages and such, creating those strategic narratives, you have to engage all three brains, right? You have to engage the brain, the heart, and the stomach, so that all three are in alignment.
I love that. I love that we've come back to alignment again, because I align with that. I know, like, it sounds like trite, but it's true. Like when we are in alignment, everything seems to flow. And we can really take hold of our businesses and propel them forward when we're in alignment, because what you touched on to me is like, we have that deep belief, and then energetically people, not everyone necessarily, but people will believe us. People will be intrigued, like you said, at least. And then they take the next step, to whatever we're doing. Is that, or at least that's what I'm understanding from you.
Well, there's no such thing as a sale. There's actually sales. So, and what that simply means is, that you have stages in the process from that initial idea being installed in that client's head, all the way through to the final purchase of whatever they're purchasing. So here's a real common example, the purchase of a car. And so you have a car purchase, and at the very beginning, the very first sale is getting somebody to read the ad in the paper or on Facebook or whatever it is. That's the sale. So you got to have a catchy headline, and there's something that they want to buy. The second one is to get them to visit your dealership. You have to actually get them to set foot in the lot. The third one would be to actually narrow down what they want and maybe do a test drive. There's a third sale. The fourth one is to get them into the finance room. You remember the finance room. If you bought a new car recently, all sorts of crazy things happening there. Okay, I didn't realize I needed that triple undercoat. I thought only a single undercoat would do well. And the 3M And on it goes. And then finally you walk out of that dealership with that car. Well, how many sales are there? Well, there's only one that there's a cash transaction for, but there's a 5 sales where I have to say yes to the next stage. So you can't sell to the final transaction. You have to sell to read my ad, come to the lot, narrow down your selection. Let's do a sales test drive. Come into the finance room, buy some 3M coating, and then finally we get into here are the keys, fully financed car, away you go.
And we drive off happy.
And we drive off happy, right? Wallet's a little lighter, but we do drive off happy.
Well, we're not focusing on that part, right? We're focusing on the happy and the feeling. No, but that's a great point. And that's, what, as you're speaking, it's like, that's what some of our sales funnels are all about, isn't it? Like
that is the whole purpose of a sales funnel. Right. And you can have a marketing funnel in there and a sales cycle. So I actually divided into 2 things. So there's a marketing funnel. And if we take a look at it, the marketing funnel probably goes all the way to showing up on the dealership lot, maybe just before the test drive. But then the sales process takes place from the post, what do you call it? Post drive, the actual test drive, all the way past the finance conversation, et cetera, et cetera. That's all sales process. So there's a marketing process and a sales process. So I say it's a marketing funnel and a sales cycle.
Okay.
And you have different techniques at different stages to remediate any kind of little glitches or any kind of, friction in the process.
Okay. So I have a question about that, because that's a great distinction between the marketing and the sales. And when we, some of our listeners, especially are like entrepreneurs, but solopreneurs, do you find that they need to be good at both of those, or should they really outsource and get, support in the marketing or the sales, or do they need to learn to fine tune both approaches themselves?
It depends how much money you have. Well, and I can tell you right now, like we have a online course right now that we're selling, and it's not inexpensive. It can be up to $7,500 US to find out how to get your Shopify rolling on Facebook and things like that, right? That process there, I very clearly divided up my sales team as a separate function to my marketing team. And in fact, I've run sales and marketing teams in other companies. And in my observation overall, marketing teams don't typically understand sales teams and vice versa. They may not even like the other guys, okay? Even though they're in the same company, because they're different motives, they're different cultures and all that kind of stuff. So you have to focus on what you do best. You might understand the marketing side of it better than the sales side, or vice versa. I've rarely found people that are good at both. So, but by definition, I would tend to think if you're a solopreneur, that you are going to be more, you have to master the sales part of it, because you can't outsource sales for the most part in the solopreneur type of operation, but you can do that with marketing quite readily. Okay.
No, that's great. I appreciate you commenting on that. I have this whole list of questions for you that I kind of outlined and took from you, and we've gone off script, which I love. So I don't know if is there anything you really want to share about this topic or your book with our listeners that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, the whole thing that I'm really trying to get across in the book, and the whole process of understanding strategic narratives, is that you have to recognize that your customer is the hero of their own journey, and your only role in that journey is that of the wise wizard, the fairy godmother, enabling that hero to achieve their quest. And that's it, right? And so you have to understand, and the book's whole point is to understand things like culture and the stories that you infuse that culture with, to make these stories come alive in your customer's head. And your customer can be your employee, it can be your kids, it can be your spouse, it can be the people that buy your products and services, it can be all sorts of different things. Now, customers, anybody that's in the audience. So who's the listener? Who's the listener?
Know them, know your audience.
Yeah. Right? So you have to tell powerful, compelling, emotive stories that make the possibilities of that future come alive, because what everybody wants is a better future state.
Mhm. So when we're telling those stories, is it fair to say that, when we have those three brains that you talked about, head, heart, stomach,
Mhm.
that with some of that storytelling, we're really focused on that heart energy to get that emotional connection? Or,
Well, the stomach is an emotional connection as well,
yeah. So
right?
you're really a stomach guy.
Well, no, I'm both actually, because
Okay.
what I'll say to you is that I would rather people come to me not for rescue, but for possibility.
Mm.
And so but we have to recognize that it's not one or the other. They're both
Oh,
in place at all times. And so you have to tell the story that is going to be most resonant to that prospect in that current state of mind.
okay.
And both sides of that coin exist at the same time, but one is going to be more prominent, right? So your 14-year-old daughter, if you go and buy her a car, if that's a possibility, right? She's, wow, what a cute car. And you're wondering, how is she going to remember to put oil in it? Right. It's those kind of things. So if I was that car dealership now, I'd say, and don't worry, mom. Okay. This has automatic maintenance reminders. Right now, I've completely taken away your pain, and the daughter's gain is still there.
You've overcome my objection. And
Yeah, there you go. It's those kind of things. So, but you have to tell the story in a stack, and the
Mhm.
stack has to be based on the priority of the motives that you have in front of them,
Okay.
that they have in front of them.
So, and when you're looking at their motives, you have different stories, I guess, for each stage or each emotional state? Is that
Yeah,
part
you
of
would
it?
have different stories to illustrate the fact for that overcomes that objection. So facts infused with meanings, with some key messages, becomes a strategic narrative. But the strategic narrative is the whole thing. But then you'd have stage-based stories along the way. So imagine a stage-based story for trying to get you onto the lot. Here's a
Mm,
stage-based story. We've just got 30 brand new Teslas, 2022 model year, and 7 of them in iridium silver. Now that's a Mercedes color, but but you know what? The rare iridium silver. Now I've just told you a story as to why you should come to the lot and take a look at it. Brand new Teslas.
brand new
They
Tesla.
just came out, right? And so that could be a story to get you onto the lot.
Gotcha. But so I have a question then. But when you're talking about the Teslas, you're marketing to a certain person, like somebody looking for electric car, right? Or a
Yep.
different paradigm, a new model. So your niche is rather small, right? In the culture that we currently exist in.
Yep.
How does one, do they just focus on getting that particular niche in, or are they also maybe simultaneously trying to expand the possibility for people that aren't yet the Tesla buyer?
So so now the question becomes, who's telling the story? So
Okay.
if I'm Elon Musk, I'm going to tell the big story, the big vision story of an electric future. But if I'm that small dealership, I don't have the money to convince, the 99.5% of the people that have not contemplated a Tesla buying a Tesla this year, that they should go to electric cars. No, I want to focus on the 0.5% that are saying,
Okay.
I'm buying a Tesla this year. But now
Mhm.
I'm trying to compete with the 2 other dealerships
Okay.
that are within the region, one other dealership, right, plus the Chevy Volt guy or whoever it is,
Mhm.
and to come into my lot. So depending on who it is, you have to tell the story that's most relevant to your business model.
Okay. Awesome. And I like that. I'm going to run out and get your book. I haven't read it yet, but I'm finding it very intriguing. When you talk about the pillars and you break them down, and that there's 7, correct?
Yeah, the 7 pillars of culture at the very beginning, which is the way your client's mind works. Okay, it is the 7 pillars that allow the entire frame of reference to take place in their understanding of the world. And then you infuse that frame of reference, the 7 pillars of that frame of reference, with the 7 essential stories. And now that's what gets people to come alive. There's already 7 stories or more that exist in their heads. It may not be the ones that you want. So that's why you install the new stories.
Gotcha.
There we go. And that's the way you go about doing it, because until you understand culture is the operating system that we all have that allows us to smoothly engage the realities of life in front of us. Now, so culture is the operating system. And so if it's the software, now I'm going to give you a set of stories to play on that system.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to give you an application now. So think of culture like Windows, and now Windows 10, Windows 11, and now I'm going to give you a set of apps that'll help you now fully understand the possibilities of your transcendent future.
Gotcha. So when we have this transcendent future, does every company or product, they need a leader, correct?
Correct.
Like to drive this ship or to dictate like where the focus is. Can you touch on, and I saw this question, what are like some crucial characteristics of a leader who wants their company culture to tell the right stories in the best way possible?
So this is a complex topic, and it's a complex topic. And I wrote a blog post. I was able to put 4 qualities of a leader, but of course, there's much more than that, right? Of a compelling, charismatic leader. There's a variety of things that you need to have, but probably the clearest thing at the very beginning is to have a deep understanding of the state of affairs, the state of everything, emotional state, economic state, cultural state of your prospect. Just understand what they are facing in the way of gain and pain, pain and gain, and how you will be able to then create a set of messages, create a value proposition first, and then a set of key messages that translate into a strategic narrative that they can bite down hard into, that they'll say, if we do this, then my future is going to be much brighter than what I have already. And my future might be my current state might be perfect, but it's going to be even better with this particular story, right? And so a leader that does not understand their marketplace can't be a great leader.
Okay.
From there's a whole bunch of other things, but that's the primary thing. Another one is equanimity. Equanimity, just having that calm, steady state of mind that no matter how excitable things get or how pessimistic people want to dive into the doldrums with, you're still steady. You're still just fine.
Really
and you
grounded.
can see the possibilities and the traps and the potential and all these kind of things all at the same time. And you are not, you are not battered around by any of those. You can plot a path forward. That's the equanimity part of it. And it just keeps going on from there. There's so many things that create a great leader, but all of that translates down to this one basic thing. A great leader with a poor story becomes a poor leader. But even a mediocre leader with a great story has the opportunity to become a great leader. So if we look at it from that perspective, a great leader has to have a great story. And it's not, and it's a dual orbit. The story orbits the leader orbits the story. And we've all been in situations where we run into somebody, 10 years later, we had really high esteem for them and really high regard for them. But now they're saying some crazy stuff. Now they're saying, wow, where did that come from? And you're having a tough time reconciling the person you knew with what they're yapping about. Right. And so whatever those messages are is part of the story. And it tends to completely destroy any of a poor story will destroy the leadership capability of that leader until they regain that story, because it is a dual orbit.
Right. So
when someone loses their way, it's almost always because they've lost their story. When they regain their story, they will regain their way.
Gotcha. That's pretty profound. And that, like we said at the beginning of this conversation, can translate into anything. Anything. So I feel like some of my big takeaway is that we need to really get good at knowing our story and really good at crafting and sharing and telling the story. Correct?
In compelling ways, yeah.
In compelling ways.
So that you can keep the rapt attention of that audience.
Cool. So if people want to keep the rapt attention of their audience, Kurian, they should get your book, right?
You should get my book. It's called The 7 Essential Stories Charismatic Leaders Tell. It's on Amazon right now for the astronomical price of $3.49.
Oh, wow.
For the Kindle version, right? So, and I wanted to make it affordable that anybody could just willy-nilly download that and, really dive into it. It's a couple of hundred pages long, but you're going to get the whole structure in that. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Kat, for
Okay.
the first 5 of your listeners that tell me that they heard me on your show. They have to say that in in the email, and I'll get you all that for your show notes. I will send them a free Kindle copy of the book.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Kurian. I appreciate that. So all of you listeners, email Kurian to let him know that you heard him on the Quantum Shift. And what's your email address? I mean, everything will be in the show notes, but if you want to.
Kurian@StrategyPeak.com.
Awesome, Kurian. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing that. This was such a fun conversation today and really informative, like I said. And we touched on so many things: alignment, temples, religion, deep beliefs, the brain, the heart, the gut, so many things. So Shauna will break some of that down in the show notes, but I really appreciate you being here and sharing, your experience and your wisdom and your humor with us today. It was really fun. Is there anything you want to share before we close down? And then I have a final question for you.
Okay, well, I sense a zinger coming on, so I'm going to get ready.
Not really a zinger, but we kind of close out with this for everybody.
I'll just leave everybody, if you picked up anything from this last hour, it's almost an hour now. It is that the only way we understand our worlds is through the stories we tell ourselves. Okay. And from a leadership perspective is that the stories that your people are telling themselves may not be the stories you want them to have. Okay? They may not be accurate. They may not be serving that audience very well. So the stories are what motivate, propagate, create the direction for the culture and then the people as a result. So we have to be very deliberate in the stories we give our people in order for them to tell those stories to themselves.
I like that. You may have already answered the question, but you can still answer it. Thank you for sharing that. What would you say to someone who found themselves at a crossroads?
I think I already said it with one of my, quotes. And I honestly believe this and that is that whenever somebody loses their way, it's almost always because they've lost their story. When they regain their story, they will regain their way. It may not be the same story that they told, but when we get into that dark night of the soul, where, you think yourself, I'm in my mid 40s now, and, what am I doing here? What does it all mean? That dark night of the soul, that is because the story you've been telling yourself didn't serve you very well to that point, or it's lost its meaning, or it's lost its relevance. And so you have to either find a way to make it meaningful, relevant again, or find a new story. One of those two things. But people cannot exist. If your only role is to exist, you're not really living a life, are you? So lives are created by the stories that you tell yourself about your purpose, your role, your future, your place in society, where we're all going together, and what we will do when we get there. And that is how we create meaning in our lives. And that's the only way we can create meaningful lives.
I really appreciate that. So it all comes down to the story,
always, every single time.
Everything comes down to the story. Kurian, thank you so much for your time and energy and expertise today and all your thoughts. We appreciate you being here, and we look forward to our listeners really getting a lot out of this conversation.